Look at us.
Amazing.
All right, we'll give everybody just a minute or so to jump in, and then we'll dive right in. It's like the longest minute waiting, waiting to start.
What do we think? Like waiting for water to boil, watching grass grow, or the first minute of a webinar?
Always the first minute of a webinar, if you're presenting, maybe even if you're in it. So feel free, anybody who's jumping in, we're seeing people jump in to pop in the chat and use that for any questions. We're going to do a Q&A at the end. So I will kick us off. Today, we're going to talk about the retail shift and what it means for your brand this year. Before we dive in, I wanted to just share a little bit about your presenters and Cro Metrics for those who don't know. Cro Metrics, our mission is to really drive sustainable growth by creating exceptional digital consumer experiences. We work with amazing brands along with Klaviyo, and our focus is on full funnel optimization through experimentation, personalization, and that overall digital experience. My name's Samantha McClure. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Cro Metrics. I've been leading marketing ops and strategy for about 15 years. I am joined by Melanie Buck, Managing Director at Cro Metrics. Melanie is one of our superstars. She has led some of the biggest digital efforts in travel and hospitality and politics, nonprofit advocacy, and D2C. So she is an expert in all things lead gen, testing, optimization, and really has that unique experience in driving high growth companies. And then last but not least, we have Cooper Samples. He is our senior agency partner manager at Klaviyo, has extensive e-commerce, SaaS, and platform experience for mid-market and enterprise brands. So I think between the three of us, we really hope to kind of break down some of the data that Klaviyo and Cro Metrics have analyzed and also give you those actionable next steps to utilize the data in your own strategies. So without further ado, let's dive in. The agenda for today, we're going to take a look at the current state of retail, shifts in consumer behavior, and examine those strategies in action with some case studies. And then most importantly, like I mentioned a moment ago, we want to leave you with practical steps to really implement these insights in your own strategies. So that brings us to our first major insight. We are calling this the retail paradox of 2024. On one side, we have that significant economic pressure that Klaviyo's research really showed that 88% of consumers said that inflation was affecting their spending decisions last year. Not really shocking to, I think, anybody, but you might expect that that would kind of lead to that pullback in consumer spending. But here's where kind of that paradox gets interesting is despite these pressures, 80% of consumers really plan to maintain their spending in 2025. And about a third of them plan to increase their spending this year. So this creates really that unique kind of tension in the market. And about 90% of retailers are expecting revenue growth. But with only 1/3 of consumers, actually planning to increase their spending, like what does that actually mean for retail and D2C and e-commerce? So as we were digging into and parsing out all of the data, it's not so much about the if people will buy, it's the when and the how and from who. And this shift obviously has been happening for a long time, and it's continuing to shape the industry as a whole. But it's just really gonna, I think, amp up based on our data in 2025. So with that kind of setting the scene, I'm going to pass it over to Cooper, and he's going to talk about where the insights that we're using today are coming from.
Thanks, Samantha. So to truly understand this transformation that we're diving in here today, we at Klaviyo gathered perspectives from both sides of the retail equation, around 1,400 executives and 800 consumers globally. We paired this with Cro Metrics' insights from over 30,000 digital marketing experiments that include information on consumer psych principles as well as behaviors. So combining these comprehensive views allow us to bridge the gap between consumer intentions and business realities, which is a crucial connection that will become clear as we examine our core findings on the next slide and then some. Melanie?
Cool. Awesome. So with all those data sets that we looked at, we've identified 3 key trends and how we think they can impact your strategy going into 2025. So the first step is consumer behavior. We're finding that shoppers are more strategic. They are researching across multiple channels before purchasing, and they're moving away from traditional best practices and seeking personalized, informed buying journeys. One interesting thing we've seen with testing across our clients is that customers really know that brands have a ton of information about them and sometimes even think that marketers have better data than they really do. Either way, consumers are really expecting and even demanding this really customized and personalized experience. So, one thing you can do here is to lean into loss aversion and urgency in your messaging to break that research cycle. That can include things like highlighting limited time offers or low stock, really anything that drives and pushes immediate decision making by emphasizing what shoppers stand to lose if they don't act quickly. Second, here we have digital integration. Our data has found that 84% of consumers actively use brand mobile apps, and this represents a largely untapped opportunity. Many fewer brands are testing in their mobile apps, and we see real opportunity here for what we call foot in the door techniques. So things like prompting users to take really small actions like enable notifications or complete a short survey. These incremental steps are key in building engagement and paving the way for larger commitments over time and ultimately becoming a repeat purchaser. It's just like we always see, right? We need to move consumers up the ladder of engagement, and the best way to do that without turning folks off is by testing which small asks really resonate most with your audience so that you can maximize those app-based interactions. And then the third insight here is value evolution. So the data showed that while 50% of customers will increase essential purchases, discretionary spending requires a much stronger value proposition, really due to some of those impacts of inflation that Samantha was highlighting earlier. And here's where experimenting with principles like the IKEA effect come into play. So for folks who aren't familiar with that term, that's encouraging customization or effort by your consumer. Things like build your own bundles or interactive design tools. And these can really elevate perceived value. I was actually just talking to a major brand yesterday who's completely rethinking their lower funnel efforts and creating this DIY, choose your own adventure, building block based experience actually in their checkout flow. And we're super excited to see the results of that. And similarly, anchoring, presenting a higher priced premium option alongside your more standard offerings can influence how customers perceive worth and encourage conversions, and again, move them up that ladder of conversion. Overall, when we look across the industry for marketers, this means more than following best practices. And in many ways, just taking best practices off the table for a minute and thinking blue sky. How can you optimize and test your multi-channel strategies, your mobile experiences, your value messaging to really determine what works best for your specific audiences? And we'll explore later in this conversation how some leading brands are succeeding with these approaches and give you some examples of how you can apply these insights to drive your own meaningful growth in 2025. So further building on this retail paradox that Samantha began teeing up, let's examine what's actually happening in the market. While 93% of consumers feel the impact of rising costs, they're not stopping their spending. They're being forced to make really hard choices about every single item they buy and spend smarter. This 54% statistic here is really interesting to me in particular. Inflation hasn't led to a decrease in consumer spending, but it's led to a decrease in how many individual items they're able to purchase. So that ties back into this need to make sure that this customer experience you're creating really matches the experience your customers are seeking. And you can see here that this has led to sort of this new type of value equation and a really interesting equilibrium point where price and quality at 78% and 77% respectively are virtually equal in importance to the consumer. And this new value equation we have here, it's price, quality, and trust equals the modern consumer value. And this is what we're thinking about and keeping front in mind as we think about how consumers are interacting with different shopping channels and how that we can optimize that experience. And I'll kick it back to you, Samantha.
Awesome. So as we kind of talk about this value equation, it plays out pretty interestingly across channels. So we have 66% of consumers are purchasing in physical stores or reporting that they're purchasing in physical stores. And yet 69% of company revenue is coming from e-commerce and digital. So the real question here is why? Why is that like happening? That consumers want to be in a physical store, but the revenue is coming from online. And what we're kind of, coming to this conclusion of is that consumers aren't thinking about their purchase in these siloed channels like a lot of our own teams do. They're thinking about it in that terms of total value and convenience. And one big factor that keeps standing out for these brands that we're seeing have really big success is how they've integrated that physical and digital channel kind of together. So, really leaning in and figuring out how to capture these consumers in that physical environment while converting them to digital for those repeat purchases on all of the digital channels is going to be what increases that LTV and leads to the overall increase in revenue. And these brands, what they're doing really well, they're finding that that mobile piece is what's helping them stand out and bridge that gap between the digital and physical worlds. We're talking like their own apps, SMS, and just overall that mobile brand interaction. Like Melanie said, turning on those notifications, getting those kind of pings. About 84% of consumers are actively using mobile apps for shopping. So obviously that's making it super clear that mobile experiences are what's kind of crucial to this modern retail environment. And when it comes to marketing on mobile devices, about 40% of consumers are saying that they're influenced by an SMS, a text message marketing in their actual purchase decisions. But only about 50% of the marketing teams are planning to increase their SMS kind of investment. So that gap between the consumer engagement and the marketing investment is where that kind of significant opportunity for brands willing to invest in figuring that out is really happening. And one way that we're helping our clients do that is with a really deep customer journey analysis to understand the unique behavior between consumers and the brand. The data that we have, obviously, Cro Metrics and Klaviyo, we're data informed. We are always getting this data, but there's also these places where consumers will report and tell you what they're going to do, and then it's not what they actually do. And so when they actually interact with your brand, it's slightly different. And so when you really understand if your consumers, for example, are experiencing a million little paper cuts through their customer journey, or if there's a big drop off between maybe buying in store and then transitioning digital, once you understand that holistic journey, you can really determine where your investment is best spent, whether it's SMS or apps or anything else. And so with that, I'm going to kind of turn it back to Melanie and Cooper to show you exactly how some brands are leveraging these types of strategies for success.
Thanks, Samantha. And before I get into this first example, I just wanted to underscore something you just said because I think it's so important. That difference between what consumers say that they do versus what they actually do. And I'm sure many folks here on this call today are, planning to do various versions of customer journey analysis, customer journey mapping. We see a lot of folks doing that in Q1. If you don't have that on your plans or in your budget, highly recommend you add it. And also would just really encourage you to make sure that you're taking a data-driven approach to that. We often see that many types of customer journey mapping experiences are kind of persona based. They're based on a lot of qualitative data, and you can get the wrong insights because your customers aren't being honest with you, and it's not on purpose, it's not intentional. We just don't know ourselves as well as we think we do. So we definitely want to be making sure you're layering in a lot of that observed data in addition to anything that you're doing in terms of customer surveys and things like that. Cool. So on to this first example here. So Laura Geller, a leading beauty brand serving women over 40, if you're not familiar. I actually love this brand. I'm wearing Laura Geller today, in fact. But they were facing a very common challenge in today's digital landscape. So they had their email and SMS marketing split across 2 different platforms, which made it nearly impossible for them to create a cohesive customer experience. In particular, their marketing team was struggling to manage overall send frequency and couldn't effectively coordinate messaging across channels. I'm sure we've all been in those rooms where there are multiple different content calendars going on multiple different devices and platforms, and it feels like you're almost competing with other channels to figure out how and when to get your message out. And compounding this was that with their data scattered across these different platforms, they were reducing the power of their own customer information and their ability to leverage that information to create a personalized customer experience. So Laura Geller here committed to change, and they were able to achieve a 3.9x growth in SMS revenue, nearly quadrupling their return from this channel. But what's particularly interesting is how they did it. And it was really pretty simple in its, which is the beauty of it, that they simply made a shift, and instead of treating SMS as a standalone channel, they integrated it fully with their email strategy and put it all in one bucket with an overarching strategy. This unified approach led to 129% growth in SMS subscribers. And this shift was really from customers just receiving messages, and it really transformed into this active two-way engagement channel. And they saw their customers really choosing to engage with them on their most personal device. We see across email and SMS, that SMS is so powerful because your open rates are incredibly high, right? You're right in someone's phone. So it's a powerful tool, but you have to use it carefully. Oh, yeah. Did
I was
someone
gonna
have
say,
something? Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say, Melanie, just to kind of underscore the simplicity aspect that you just
Yeah.
mentioned, I think it's so interesting when once you kind of like can pinpoint, and that customer journey really does that, analysis really does that. When you pinpoint like what that issue is, whether it's a tech stack integration or it's that like million paper cuts, what comes to mind of a super simple fix was one of our clients. We did this customer journey analysis for, and we were finding that million paper cuts issue on messaging just across their buyer journey, and literally one tweak to messaging across their entire journey had something like a 400% jump in conversion rates. And so sometimes I think a lot of, at least for me, a lot of times I'm digging into the data, I'm looking, I'm like, it's got to be some like super complex solution, and a lot of the times it's just the complexity of understanding the data and the customer, and then the solution itself is actually like pretty simple. So I just wanted, because of what you mentioned in that simplicity, I just wanted to like underscore that because I think that's so interesting.
Totally. I love that you highlighted that because it's so often we're looking for that silver bullet. What is that one thing we're missing? And it's often not just that one big thing that you're missing. It's just a simple tweak that comes from a deep understanding of that customer experience. The second example here, let's see, brings us to the power of personalization. So this is really interesting and sort of another dichotomy here where 90% of consumers who engage with personalized experiences see clear benefits. Like that's what the data tells us. Yet only 54% of companies are actively using personalization. And truly, actively using personalization is just the tip of the iceberg. Like once you begin with personalization, you really want to be testing into it carefully, consistently, and across channel. It's not just, flick a switch. Now you have personalization. Now you're doing the thing and seeing the results. So in this example you see to the right, this e-commerce homepage had an extremely high percentage of return users, which is great. Now the challenge was that all of the return users were seeing the same marketing material on the homepage, and it did not align with the user's preferred product category, and was in no way informed by their past shopping behavior. So the solution was to come in and personalize the homepage, specifically starting with this hero image that you see here and those 3 different images. That is your biggest, most important real estate. It's an excellent place to start. And the second place to start is really the associated calls to action. So any CTAs you have also around that real estate area. And we personalized these 2 areas to reflect the primary category of the products the user had previously interacted with. So this category preference was determined by reflecting the category of the product detail page the user most recently viewed. So you can get as into the weeds with this as you want. It depends on the strength of your data and your MarTech stack and what you can pull out. But it can also be really, really simple too. The result we saw here was a 51% increase in click-throughs from the homepage header. That was huge. However, the learning was that this only marginally correlated to an increase in conversions. So it was a step in the right direction, but we didn't see it pull through the full conversion funnel. And so that's why, we say that personalization is the place to start. It's not the be all and end all in and of itself. Testing into personalization is the key part of that consumer life cycle. And I think, that's the challenge that most organizations and brands really run into in trying to spin up and run effective personalization programs. It's that they require unified customer data, seamless multi-channel execution capabilities, and ultimately a deeply internalized culture of testing and experimentation to create the best customer experience. And Cooper, I'll kick it to you for the last example here.
Yeah, thank you. And a third and final case study that we'd like to show here is Helen of Troy. So they're a $1 billion plus company with multiple major household brands that you can see below, like OXO, Hydro Flask. And they also faced a very common personalization roadblock. So despite having valuable customer data, their fragmented technology stack made it nearly impossible to use the data effectively. And the challenge was clear. Their previous marketing provider required developer support for the most basic of functionality. And every feature needed an upgrade and upcharge to the line items. And they just find that they couldn't even track SMS performance without having to check GA. So this obviously was a huge roadblock, a headache, and the fragmentation wasn't just an operational headache. It was preventing them from delivering the personalized experiences that their customers want. That's the most important thing these days, is to be able to deliver these experiences how your customers want them to see. And so their transformation that tells a very powerful story about the impact. And by consolidating their technology stack to Klaviyo, Helen and Troy can now, 1, store and activate first-party data effectively. 2, they can create sophisticated multi-channel personalizations. 3rd, they can share data seamlessly between marketing channels. And 4th, they can build lookalike audiences for targeted acquisition. So this case study here perfectly illustrates why that stat in the last slide that Melanie shared, that 90% of consumer satisfaction with personalization we saw is achievable with the right technology foundation and the right services partner in place.
Yeah, we're actually working right now on hopefully a soon-to-be migration to Klaviyo with another customer that has exactly the same challenge, and it's really, really exciting to see those unlocks become available. It's just everything is so many different places. If you just put it in one place, you can do so much more.
Awesome. All right. And so to kind of put a bow on this whole webinar and presentation for you, we wanted to bring all of these elements together and what the action item for you could be within your own team. So first one is the shift is how, not if, not anything else. It is how and when. So the action item here is really to focus on that high value messaging and test and understand what drives that trust and value with your consumer. Going back to, is it that, IKEA consumer message? Is it the, time-based message? What's really resonating with people, and making sure that that's what you're using. Obviously, as marketers, we all know that omnichannel is a non-negotiable, but the important action item here is to understand your customer's journey. Are they craving that brand mobile interaction? Are they looking for that physical experience? And then you need to convert them somehow to digital. That is the key to really unlocking a lot of the growth potential. So a customer journey analysis is a great place to start within your organization. Like Melanie said, if you don't have it planned for Q1, you should definitely plan it for Q1 now. Number 3 here is evaluating that tech stack. We just saw how much of an impact Helen of Troy was able to have with tech investments and just consolidating. A lot of times it's not get rid of this, cut this. It's how do we make this easier for us to access the data that we need to have and then deploy everything that we want to. And then the last thing, and I feel like I'm always preaching to the choir of marketers when I talk about this last one, is we know that customer first, customer experience marketing is always going to be the thing that wins out long term. If we can understand where the customer is, we can meet them where they are. There's the win. If we know what type of experience they want to have, we can personalize it to drive that better result and ultimately a better experience. The goal always is to connect the brands and the products with the right people at the right time. And, you can't do that without all of these things in place. So we're going to jump into a Q&A section here in just a minute, but I wanted to just quick plug that the Cro Metrics team, the Klaviyo team, we're always just happy to jump on a 30-minute call and chat about what you're working with, what you're struggling with, and recommend whether it's, with us or how your team can do these things internally. We'd love to talk. So the contact information is going to be on the next page, but we'll also, you don't need to scramble to write it down. We'll send it out afterwards with the webinar recording. And we're always here. We love connecting with anybody in the industry. So with that, let's open it up. I haven't looked at the Q&A section, so give me a second and I'm going to stop sharing and we can dive in. All right. We have a question in here about personalization. So Melanie, or I guess Cooper, if you guys want to take a stab at this, is it better to start with one-to-one personalization, one-to-few, or one-to-many? And if so, with that, do you start in your email? Is there a place that you should really start on your website? What is the recommendation there?
Sure. I'd say from my perspective, the clients we see most successfully leveraging personalization have sort of a sliding scale. And the important thing here is to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If you don't think you can do effective one-to-one personalization, that's okay. You don't need to start there. It's kind of taking how can you take the one to all that you may currently be doing and begin to add layers onto that. So it's maybe the one to many, one to several, one to few, one to one as you get increasingly confident in your data.
Yeah, and I'll add that at least in the Klaviyo platform, how we usually personalize is through segmentation. You can get very, very granular with it to get to that almost one-to-one level, but we find that it's a little bit more effective to be able to speak to cohorts at a time. So defining your segments based on certain properties or certain values, certain events that they've done in the past, you can filter that very easily. You can even leverage AI within the Klaviyo platform to build out these segments on your behalf. So I definitely more in the camp of one to many to start out. And then once you figure out how to do that effectively, you can narrow it down.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would just add on to that. Yeah, that one to one, might seem like the dream, but you also want to be really clear eyed about resource limitations and where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Like which segments are worth taking that extra time and creating a really personalized experience because they're going to convert at much higher rates and give you that ROI. You don't want to be doing it just for the sake of doing it.
That's great. That is the only question. Is anyone live that wants to get something answered? Well, you have these 3 Leo minds. We just found out right before the call that we're all Leos. So we're ready to talk if anybody is ready to ask a question. But because we're Leos, we are always down to jump on a call and answer any question you may have. We love to chat about what we're working on and what might be applicable to you. Give
Yeah.
everybody a couple minutes. Melanie, and sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just to say, and if you think, a cursory audit or something like that, you just want a gut check, you're like, I'm thinking that this might be an area of opportunity for us. What do you think? Like, we're happy to pop in and take a really quick look and give you a sense of where some low hanging fruit might be.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
And I think the other thing I would say, just while we're giving folks just a minute here, is that sometimes, making changes can feel scary. Like you're like, oh, the level of effort required. We see this all the time, whether it's, switching your marketing automation tool, your email platform, SMS, your on site Cro testing tool. It can sometimes feel like a really scary thing and something that you just don't want to deal with. And I would encourage you that if it feels that way, it's not that scary. Just start the process. We're happy also to answer questions or evaluate different tools for you. Whatever you think would be the first step, it's just taking that step and getting your folks on board, and it's really not this big scary thing.
Awesome. We did have some questions come through from Sophie. SMS question: how is it best in Flow? Same time as email, different, and overall, how it's working best in the same flow. I think maybe that's Cooper.
I mean, I can take my best stab at it, but I trust our services partner here, Cro, as they do this on behalf of their clients. But it's all depends on like the frequency of buying and repeat purchases that the brand is selling. So like furniture, right? That's a very once a year, if not many year purchase, and email may be easier to be on top of mind, while SMS is obviously a little bit more expensive of a tactic to implement. But if it's like a clothing brand, like that you're purchasing a little bit more frequently, then SMS may be a little bit more valuable as you want to gain and foster that loyalty. So we get more, propensity to buy and purchase and repeat purchases. But Melanie, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I would say one thing building off of that is that we definitely do see that there are desktop purchases. In particular, we work with a number of clients in the travel and hospitality industry. And often, if you are making like a week-long reservation at an all-inclusive resort, you might be doing that more so on your desktop versus like off the fly on your phone versus a really aptly timed Laura Geller Instagram ad when it hits you at the right moment and you're like, yes, I do need that for my makeup drawer. So I think it definitely depends. I also think, Sophie, you mentioned, is it best to send the SMSs the same time as email or different? That's really interesting and something that we're actively testing with our clients. I was just on a call with someone yesterday where we were digging into this. In that particular case, they found that on really big sale days, like key moments, it was ideal to send both email and SMS on the same day. Usually they start with their email in the morning, follow up with an SMS in the evening. For other days, they found that they thought SMS might actually be cannibalizing their email revenue in a bit of a way. And so they weren't sure that they were augmenting their overall revenue pot. They were more so just reallocating it between the two channels, which wasn't, I mean, it's fine. It's all, all money in the same pot at the end of the day, but it wasn't ideal for their goals. So I think thinking about how it fits with what's going on in your broader kind of sale strategy has a really big impact.
Yeah. And then Hannah came into the Q&A and asked if we could explain the IKEA effect further. She said, I found that really interesting. I would love to hear more thoughts on it. I can take a quick stab and then Melanie or Cooper, if you want to jump in. But for the IKEA effect, so this was like coined, I think, in like 2016, but obviously this has been happening for a long time. Essentially what IKEA found is that when you give consumers like the hands-on, which is the assembling of IKEA furniture, that they feel more inclined that like that was a really good purchase and they hang on to it longer and then they come back more frequently. So for IKEA, it's creating these step-by-step like procedural things and getting people unfortunately or fortunately engaged in the building of the product. For others, though, like Build-A-Bear has been doing that for years, where you're actually going into the store or going online and you are building your bear. And that translates, I think, across retail and e-commerce in general in that customization of products. Can you help somebody give even just like an ounce of customization, whether it's in the shopping experience or once they receive the product, to make it feel like they have more ownership over what they just purchased and give that like plus of extra value? So that's kind of how I would explain it. Anyone else want to tack on to that?
Totally. I think it's like, yeah, getting that buy-in from your customers because it's something that they helped co-create with you. I feel like we see this as marketers with our own teams also, right? Sometimes you have to get a lot of different teams on board with some big and new initiative you want to do. And it's just like, how can you co-create and get that sense of ownership and buy-in? I also think it's not exactly the IKEA effect, but an interesting sort of similar tactic that we see often these days in the marketplace is surveys. And so asking your customers what they think, that is a type of getting that buy-in and giving them ownership and saying, hey, you are helping us create our products. We want to hear from you. You're now part of this. It's all kind of that sort of investment in the customer relationship.
I've seen a couple of brands do that well on social media. The immediate one that comes to mind because they just launched into Target, I think, is the Blogilates
Oh,
brand.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she will always, like when they launch something new, take screenshots of, can we get this product? Can we get this sweater with this, this, and this? And she's like, you guys told me what you wanted and I made it. And then she launches, that product. And so I think that, again, while not directly correlated to or not directly that IKEA effect, it is kind of correlated and in the same vein of getting people's interaction. And I think that just speaks to, where do your consumers want to engage with you? And like, let's find that out and let's get there and engage with them there. They're way more likely to be that repeat customer and, get that repeat LTV and purchase going if they feel like you're listening to them in building, kind of going back to that value kind of equation, that trust in addition to the quality of the product or the quality of the service. Get that trust. People, that's why influencer marketing works so well. People buy things from people they trust and they feel like they know, even in the, parasocial world. So, figure that out. And that's like really where that magic happens.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that wraps up Q&A and chat. Like I said, we're going to send out our contact information. Find us over on LinkedIn. We love to continue these conversations and help you guys really take it to the next level. So thank you, everybody, for joining, and we will talk soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.